This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. In the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk. And in the nighttime hours, 1150 AM KKNW in Seattle. It is the Matt McNeil Show for your Thursday. Good to have you with us today. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Guest free here in the this hour here. Coming up in the 4 o'clock hour locally, we are going to be talking to Naomi Kritzer. She's an author of science fiction, but also she has done a fantastic blog. She's doing a service to Minneapolis, St. Paul with Will Tell Stories for Food, her blog, where she breaks down the lower ballot races. And, you know, have you ever walked into an election day and you got your ballot and you're like, okay, president, all right, Senate, all right, okay, my House rep, all right, my local state, and okay, my county commissioner, all right, you water table guy, all right, flip it over. 19 judge races, what the heck? You ever have that happen to you? It's happened to me. Well, she actually breaks down those judge races. And you shouldn't just blindly vote on those suckers. You should know who's running, and we'll talk to her. And she does judge races, she does county commissioner races, the lesser races she actually talks about, and she is wonderful, and I get to talk to her about that. You should know who's on your ballot. You should. And Seattle, Chicago, I know Chicago, you got this. On those lower races, they've got the research out there. Got to track that down, find out that information. It is so important for us to make sure that we're voting. You know, there's a lot of times that gets thrown away stuff and people don't fill it out, but you got to fill that out because extremists are getting all their buddies to show up. And on some of those races, it doesn't take much for them to be able to pull off an upset and get a win there. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Patrick, how are we today? How are things going?
Doing pretty well. I got my seasonal vaccination, so I'm a little fatigued today, but other than that, pretty good.
Also normal. Ha! Did you get both or one?
I got both.
I did both, too. Arm hurt because I had Helga, the javelin thrower, give me the vaccination. Thanks, Helga. When she started with the running start, I was like, oh, my gosh. My arm hurt, but I wasn't like other people who have said that they feel bad afterwards. I was a little tired, maybe, but I could just have been tired because I'm 55 years old now, and that's just the way I am.
Yeah, by last night I was kind of feeling the chills a little bit. It didn't hit me like a truck like the initial vaccination series back in 2021. I remember I was sitting there, it's just I'm just fine, and then now I feel awful.
I remember going to the VA because of my veteran status, I was able to go get my COVID shots. And they are like, we want you. They wanted the military guys to come in and get their shots at the VA. So I went and got my shots at the VA. They would not let you leave for a half hour after your shot. They said, you're sticking around. We're going to make sure everything's okay. And so it was nice. I got to talk to a few guys from a distance, at that point.
I forgot about that. I think for me it was 15 minutes. I had forgotten about that wait time.
Well, I always love going to the VA and every military guy is going to appreciate this. By the way, U.S. Army, 3rd of the 5th Field Artillery, Armed Forces Radio Network, Nuremberg, Germany, hoo-ah. To all those who served, I appreciate it. I love going to the VA because I'll go down to the cafeteria and I quite literally will have the same exact meal I had 30 plus years ago when I was in the U.S. Army. It's the same thing. It tastes exactly the same. And I like it. I'm not, don't judge, don't at me. I like it. It is. I just love that. You get the chance. If you're a vet, get the chance. Go and try the food. It's like, oh my goodness, I now remember this. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. Well, things in the Trump camp seem to be going well. A fight broke out between men selling memorabilia hours ahead of when former President Donald Trump was expected to take the stage at a rally in Saginaw, Michigan at approximately 10:20 this morning. Now, this, by the way, I want to make sure to mention, this rally doesn't start until 3. Do you know all these guys that sit there and they complain about, whenever there's a rally and a lot of Democrats show up and they say, well, some of us have jobs. Dude, it's a Thursday. You're in Michigan. You're showing up and the line was already pretty long at 10:20. The thing doesn't start till 3. You're taking your entire day to go see, the orange tub of goo. Well, some of us have to work for a living, slackers. Anywho, approximately at 10:20 a.m. outside of the line, more than 1,000 attendees at the rally at Ryder Center Health and Physical Education, Saginaw Valley State University's campus in University Center. Wow, that's a name. A group of men who were selling Trump memorabilia got into a physical altercation where briefly 2 vendors stood above one other vendor and punching him in the head. Now, what you don't see in my description is it's 2 white guys on top of an African-American man punching him in the head, to which he threw one of them off of him and started going after the other guy. And that's when the other guy got really, so when all of a sudden it was really the tide had turned on this fight, the cops got there, and of course that's when he got really talky. Yeah. Associated Press confirmed the fight was between vendors and members of the Trump campaign told the Michigan Advance that all the vendors were removed from the premises. The Trump campaign reports that all the individuals involved in the altercation were vendors. None were attendees at all, and all were ejected from the premises. I don't know why. If you're in line, it's one of 2 things. One, it could just be good old-fashioned racism because, let's face it, that's on brand for a Trump rally. And they could see, wait a second, a minority's here? Well, we got to go tell them what's right and what's wrong. Well, I show off my Confederate flag tattoo. Yeah, now we know. So it could be that, or it could just be one of those people who's like, wait a second, this is my section of the line. This is where I'm selling my, let's go Brandon, only Brandon's marked out, and they put in, against Kamala or something like that. They just, with a Sharpie, they've written on it because they got to resell their shirts. This is my section of the line to sell my merch. It's one of the 2. Needless to say, I'd love to find out more about it. And I'd also like to talk about this because it sure looks racist-y. It looks really, really racist-y. But that's on brand for the Trump campaign at this point. J.D. Vance, Mr. Cats and Dogs, after refusing to answer the questions about the debate stage on Tuesday, the GOP's vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance, also, maybe he's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. He falsely claimed on Thursday that Donald Trump won the 2020 election, as well as refused to say he'll accept a loss. I want to repeat that because, once again, in case you missed the briefing, and I'll get into that here, that was just released yesterday that Stein and I were touching on just as it was coming down. He has now said, for the record, that Trump won in 2020. Fact check, no, he didn't. And hundreds of lawsuits were filed to try to find these fraudulent votes, these throwaway ballots, all these things. And Republican judge after Republican judge after Republican judge said, that's not how this works. Now, granted, if you get to that guy that with the mifepristone ruling down in Oklahoma, or was it Texas? It's one of the 2 of them. Anyway, if you get that guy, he might do it, but he still would get thrown out on appeal for sure. The reality is that there was no fraud. We have Donald Trump on the phone, a recording of him demanding the Georgia officials commit election fraud and take away the right winner, which was Joe Biden, and install him as the winner. And once again, I'm going to get to all this here because the Jack Smith, release of documents, the charging documents on him, that is very telling. They all knew. They all knew it was fake. They all knew it was made up. It was just somebody's got a little temper tantrum, and the big orange narcissist can't take the fact that he was rejected by the American people. Trump's running mate, who is propped up, and by the way, talk about throwing away any bit of goodwill you had built up with the people that didn't know all about you after the debate. Trump's running mate, who had propped up the GOP presidential nominee's election conspiracy theories in the past, continued to do so when Jason Selvig of the Good Liars, a political comedy duo, asked him if he believes Trump's recent disproving claims that President Joe Biden stole the election from him. After refusing to answer questions about it on the debate stage on Tuesday night, the GOP vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance, falsely claimed on Thursday that Trump won the 2020 election, and as well as refused to say if he'll accept a loss. Trump's running mate, who has propped up the GOP presidential nominee's election conspiracy theories in the past, continued to do so, and Jason Selvig of the Good Liars, confront him on this. He asked whether he'd concede if President Kamala Harris and the Democratic nominee for president gets more votes than Trump. Vance refused to answer that. I really feel bad for you, Vance said to Selvig after he repeated the question. Vance has been facing pressure to address where he stands on Trump's election conspiracy theory since the last recent debate against Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz. On stage, Walz asked Vance if he still believes Trump was the true victor in the 2020 election, alluding to comments Vance made earlier this year questioning the election's results and saying Trump should ignore illegitimate U.S. Supreme Court rulings on the matter. Tim, I'm focused on the future, Vance replied. Walz quickly called him out then. That's a damning non-answer, he said. I'm pretty shocked by this. Trump lost the election. That's not a debate. It's not anything anywhere near what Donald Trump, it's not anything anywhere other than Donald Trump's world. You lost, dude. You lost. And we all know it. You tried to overturn it. The courts were basically laughing at you. You basically sent a mob to attack the U.S. Capitol to try to force the overturning of the election. You lost. And every time you guys keep coming out, it's like, when the facts come out, facts are all out. You keep, what you want is exactly what I said yesterday when I was talking about when Vance was trying to appeal to Republican voters by saying, you should be able to force people to have your timeline up and they can't question or comment it. They have to accept what you say as factual truths. That's what these people are doing. That is what all these MAGA heads are doing. They want to force you to have to accept their version of reality, and you can't question it or debate it. You just have to take it as fact. And that's not freedom of speech. That's totalitarianism. That's a dictator. That's a despot. That is my way or the highway, and that's North Korea. It is truly sad that we are still here. But yet, here we are. And once again, they're setting things up to where when they lose in November, they're going to encourage another revolution. We'll talk about that. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on Thursday. It is the Matt McNeil Show on your Thursday. Oh, I've got something special for you coming up here with Tina Peters. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. You are going to. It's good, man. It's so good. I am a tease. OnlyFans. All right, 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Speaking of the greatest disgrace this country has ever produced, Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was told by White House aides that his own vice president, Mike Pence, had to be evacuated from the Senate on January 6th for his own safety following an inflammatory tweet from Trump, the former president had but two-word response, so what? Okay, step back. One of the presidents, I think this is during the War of 1812, as the British burned down the White House and the Capitol, actually took command of, was that Madison or Monroe? It's one of the two. Do you remember off the top of your head? It's Madison or Monroe. One of the two of them took command of a cannon team and actually was the only president in history to actually lead in combat at the time he was president. If you could just, is it Madison? It's one of the two. It's either Madison or Monroe. I think it's Madison, off the top of my head. It could be wrong. But it was, there are these times and these things that happen that even though you might not be known for much in your presidency, you will be known for that. I don't think most people know much about William McKinley. He was unfortunately assassinated in office by, I believe was that the anarchists? Yeah, I think it was the anarchists that got McKinley. And so we remember McKinley mainly for that, and also the fact that his vice president was Teddy Roosevelt, who ended up becoming one of the more popular presidents in the history of the country. Nixon, there are some things that Nixon did which weren't bad. They weren't great, but they weren't bad. But all we know Nixon for is, well, he basically got out of office. We will never... The sitting president of the United States commanded a mob to go get him in regards to his vice president. A sitting president ordered mob violence on his sitting vice president. History-wise, we will never come across anything so bizarre again. Nope. That's insanity. And it's not like all of a sudden, it was not like Lincoln and Johnson where he brought someone in for the other party to try to equal. No, this was a guy who basically couldn't brown-nose the man enough. He ordered a mob to attack him, and when they said, oh, he's in trouble, so what? Give me more ketchup. The antidote was among hundreds of pieces of evidence gathered by federal prosecutors into a 165-page court filing unsealed on Wednesday in the 4-count felony prosecution against Trump for his actions leading up to and during the coup attempt. Much of the information in the filing was previously known, thanks largely to the work of House January 6 committee, albeit in broader strokes. But key players in the Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election loss and remain in office did not cooperate with that committee. They did, however, honor prosecutors' subpoenas. Pence, a crucial witness, as Smith makes clear almost from the start, had repeatedly told Trump that he lost and to look ahead to the 2024 election instead. On November 12th, during a private lunch with Trump, Pence reiterated a face-saving option for the defendant. Don't concede, but recognize the process is over. In another private lunch, this was on December 21st, Pence encouraged the defendant not to look at the election as a loss, just as an intermission. The brief then offers a detailed chronology of Trump's attempts to coerce Pence into rejecting the electors from states Biden had won and simply declare that Trump had won instead. Trump made his last effort to persuade Pence just minutes before he took to the stage at his rally in the Ellipse, just south of the White House. Trump again demanded that Pence declare him the election winner, but Pence again refused. The defendant was incensed. He decided to reinsert into his campaign speech at the Ellipse remarks, targeting Pence for his refusal to misuse his role in the certification, and the defendant set in motion the last plan to furtherance of his conspiracies. If Pence would not do as he asked, the defendant needed to find another way to prevent the certification of Biden as president. So on January 6th, the defendant sent the Capitol a crowd of angry supporters whom the defendant had called to the city and inundated with a false claims of outcome, demonstrative election fraud to induce Pence to not certify the illegitimate electoral votes and obstruct the certification. Trump sent out a tweet telling his followers that Pence had lacked the courage to do as he was told at 2:24 p.m., which was followed by a surge of his supporters onto the Capitol. A minute later, Pence had to be removed by the Secret Service, detailed to a secure location. As Pence came within yards of Trump's angry mob, the president demonstrated his unconcern for his running mate's life. As Smith brief details, Trump was just as unbothered by safety concerns as the run-up to January 6. When the campaign aimed toward Trump operative, both of whose names have been blacked out, that attempts to block the vote counting in Detroit could lead to unrest, the operative responded, make them riot, do it. Wow. The defendant's campaign operatives and supporters used similar tactics at other tabulation centers, including in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the defendant sometimes used the resulting confrontations to falsely claim that his election observers were being denied process. One of his private lawyers, apparently a childhood friend of Jared Kushner, reportedly told Trump that he had lost and that the legal cases were not going to succeed. Trump replied that the details don't matter. Smith then said Trump and his co-conspirators who have not been indicted simply made up figures out of whole cloth and then provided Arizona as an example. The conspirators started with the allegation that 36,000 non-citizens voted in Arizona. 5 days later, it was beyond credulity that a few 100,000 didn't vote, he wrote. 3 weeks later, the bare minimum was 40 or 50,000. The reality was 250,000. Days later, it was the assertion of 32,000. Ultimately, the conspirators landed back where they were at 36,000, a false figure they never certified or corroborated. They were just making it up. Reminder, Giuliani, the night of the election, when they put it on hold and they said, we still have to count the votes in Pennsylvania. And I don't think Georgia was back, and I don't think Arizona was back at that point. Was running through the White House screaming, don't concede, don't concede, don't concede. This was from the beginning. That they were already going to try to force their will on the American people. Donald Trump is truly one of the worst human beings that has ever lived. He is a horrible, horrible human being. He's a racist, he's a bigot, he's a narcissist, he's self-centered. He was on Jeffrey Epstein's planes out to the child sex island multiple times with underage girls on those planes. For God's sakes, people. He is truly a horrible guy. He's not Christian in the least bit. He is truly a horrible, horrible human being. And he tried to get a mob to kill his own vice president so that he could stay in office. The fact that this is even close at all is an embarrassment of the ages. It is an embarrassment. And this is why we all have to vote this upcoming election. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
Let me tell you, you my little boo thing, so I'll give a hoot what you do. Say, girl, I know you a little too tame. I'll be
broadcasting in the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk. In the nighttime hours, 11:50 a.m. KKNW in Seattle, and of course on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Good to have you with us. Nice to have me here today. By the way, it was Madison. Madison was the president that took command of a unit as they were escaping. His wife, and you brought up the point, the Roger Williams, George Washington painting, the only reason that survived is that Dolly Madison went to the White House, grabbed that flute that Lizzo played. Do you remember that thing, the crystal flute? I think that was also grabbed. She grabbed what she could out of the White House before it got burned down by the British and got into Virginia with it. And so that's kind of the interesting thing. You remember that. Why? Because it was, I don't think most people remember anything else that Madison did during his presidency. But, you remember that because it was one thing that kind of spoke out. Donald Trump ordered an angry mob to go get him towards his own vice president. Disgusting creature. But his disgusting creature made other disgusting creatures, which brings us to the Smile File. Oh, are you ready for some good news, everybody? Who wants a little tickle to your spirit? OnlyFans. All right, here we go. Tina Peters, a prominent election denier and Trump supporter, was sentenced on Thursday to 8.5 years in prison and 6 months in jail for election tampering after prosecutors and witnesses blamed her for fueling a national movement to undermine the trust in the U.S. elections. The prison sentence is one of the first for perpetrators the big lie, and the 2020 presidential election was stolen from then-President Trump. Colorado District Court Judge Matthew Barrett, an appointee of the Democratic governor, issued the sentence after telling the former Mesa County clerk she's in danger of the community who would do it all over again if you could. As a matter of fact, let's tell you what, we've got some audio to play with. We're going to play first. This is Tina Peters, who basically, if you've ever heard this woman, I don't know if you've ever saw the arrest footage of her, the body cam footage from the cops when she got arrested. It's like, how dare you touch me? Don't you know who I am? One of those people. This is a woman who clearly does not understand how much trouble she's in, and she honestly thinks she can just talk her way out of it because she's immersed herself in this MAGA bubble where she's a god, which is not the real world. So first, let's play Tina Peters addressing the judge before the sentencing came down.
I'm very taken back by how awful I've been depicted when I was just trying to do my job.
Sorry.
The people expected me to do. When I look at the people that have spoken here today and asking for harsh sentences, I'm just appalled. I feel bad for them because I know I've often said God doesn't like people messing with his kids. And I believe I'm a child of God.
God's like, whoa, leave me out of it.
It was important for someone to stand up, and I chose to do that. I have health problems that would not be treatable in the Department of Corrections.
Not really.
First of all, I need a magnetic mattress. I've been on that since 1995. I was in 2 rear-end collisions in 84 and 2010. It was pretty severe. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit, and chronic fatigue as a result. And I had to stop working for the airlines in 1995. I was up all night because I was in bed all day. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't control these symptoms until I got, believe it or not, a magnetic mattress of which I still sleep on. I will not have that at the Department of Corrections.
Oh, boo-hoo. Not the magnetic mattress. Is this like what they got Deadpool and Wolverine in that movie there, where it was a big metal magnet thing and you kind of fly up against it and you're held in position? Is that the medical bed you have? A magnetic mattress. Does it hum? Is that something for OnlyFans? I don't know. It could be. All right. So as you can hear, she's, first of all, bringing God into this. And like I said, God's like, whoa, leave me out of this stuff. I have nothing to do here. I made Biden win. I'm God. I made Biden win. I didn't want him back in the office. You guys kept trying to, you were doing the other guy's bidding. That's God. So there's that. There's the magnetic mattress. There's the other things. Yeah, it's not good. Needless to say, who wants to hear something that's going to brighten your day? Here is the judge. This is around 3 minutes or so. We might not play the whole thing, but it's around 3 minutes or so. This is Judge Matthew Barrett. This is handing down the sentence.
I'm convinced you would do it all over again if you could. You're as defiant as a defendant as this court has ever seen. You don't have those histories of drug and alcohol abuse. There's no lifetime of trauma, not even close to the type of mitigating circumstances I would see from many folks who sit in that chair. No, to the contrary, Ms. Peters, you are a privileged person. You are as privileged as they come. And you use that privilege to obtain power, a following, and fame. And to be sure, there's no doubt in my mind that it's exactly what you wanted, and it defies all sense of common sense to believe when you suggested to me a few moments ago that you didn't want this attention. No, you crave it, ma'am. And there is no one in this courtroom who would consider that to be anything other than the absolute truth. But to get to the point of what it is that you did here, it's my impression distinctly that you never took your job of clerking particularly seriously. You didn't complete the certification. One scandal after another followed you in your time as the clerk. And ultimately, it was a belief that the echo chamber in which you live couldn't be wrong, among other things, that led you to do what you did here. This thought process, unfortunately, seems to consume so many in our country, regardless of race, gender, political affiliation, or the like, that what it is we hear and think can't possibly be wrong. There are many things in my mind that are crystal clear about this case. You are no hero, you abused your position, and you're a charlatan who used and is still using your prior position in office to peddle a snake oil that's been proven to be junk time and time again. In your world, it's all about you. But at bottom, this case was about your corrupt conduct and how no one is above the law. No one in this country has absolute power. Your position as a clerk and recorder, a constitutional position, does not provide you with a means by which to do your own investigation, to not listen to the judiciary, to not listen to the executives higher than you, to not listen to the legislature who sets the law as it may be. This is nonsense. Our system of government can't function when people in government think that somehow, some way, the power they've been given is absolute in all respects. And that's where you fell. You have no respect for the checks and balances of government. You have no respect for this court. You have no respect for law enforcement. And you do not have respect for your fellow colleagues when you were a clerk and recorder who weren't lockstep in your beliefs.
Once again, the sentence was 8.5 years that was handed down. Yeah, fantastic. And to dress her down in court like this, where your Newsmax OAN, right-wing, fairgrounds, private meeting groups that you have, that's not reality. This is reality. And there is something delicious about this woman getting knocked down off her perch and to put her into jail. And there's something that we all should work for. I'll get to that in a second. But Bob is in Columbia Heights, wanted to chime in. Okay, Bob, thank you very much. I appreciate the phone call today.
Yeah, hi, Matt. Like I was telling your screener, my wife died about a little over 2 years ago, and she had one of those magnetic mattresses.
Okay.
And I can tell you they're quite heavy, and I've struggled with, first of all, getting it out from underneath her regular mattress, and I need help getting it down the stairs, but I'd be more than willing to donate it to this lady to whatever prison she's going to.
That is how wonderful of you to do this. Maybe we could get this. We could put a big bow on it. Okay, so can I ask, what exactly is it? Is it just a mattress with a magnet on the bottom of it?
Well, like I said, they're quite heavy. It's about 2 inches thick. It folds up. It's got magnets placed throughout it. I don't know how heavy they are, but probably at least 100 pounds. My wife had 2 of them, one for each side of her queen-size bed that she slept on. She was a massage therapist, so she got into all those kinds of off-the-wall, off-the-wall woo-woo stuff.
I'll go with kinky. If you accidentally wear like jewelry to bed, are you stuck there? Like like it's like a Leslie Nielsen skit stuck to a giant magnet?
That would be funny, but no. She did say that to keep your smartphone away, if you had one, from the mattress. So she would always put her phone on a bedstand at least 10 feet away from her bed.
Oh, that made it convenient. Well, Bob, I don't know if anyone from the Colorado Metroplex area is listening to us right now, but if you know which prison Tina is going to, let them know that if you do need a magnetic mattress, we will give it to you. You just have to come to Bob's house and carry it out of there because it sounds like it weighs a ton.
There you go.
There you go. And you can have the second one for free. It's a 2-for offer. There you go.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. Oh. So, like I said, kinky, OnlyFans. All right, good. Thank you. I'm all over that. Gosh. Does it make a sound effect like a 1950s science fiction movie? I must lay on the bed. Does it glow from underneath? Hello there. I'm in my magnetic pod. Oh, she needs that. Oh, prison's going to be just a delight for her. I can't wait for, you're going to have to make sure this woman doesn't get knifed the first day. How dare you talk to me? Don't you know? Oh my God, that's a toothbrush you've sharpened. He told Peters, the judge told Peters, that she is no hero. You abused your position. You're a charlatan. Peddled snake oil, provided wrong time and time again. The jury in August found Peters, 68, guilty on all 7 of 10 counts. All seven of 10 counts, including 4 felonies related to her role in tampering with county voting equipment and records after the 2020 election. The guilty charge included first-degree official misconduct, 3 counts of attempting to influence a public servant and violation of duty. She faced up to 20 years in prison, and the prosecution asked for the maximum sentence, or at least the midpoint. And so the judge was still being nice to her, not giving her the full time, or even half time. In 40 minutes of remarks to the judge, Peters defended her actions, disputed the conduct of the trial, and asked the judge for leniency and no jail time. Of course, she's going to appeal. Okay, so if you want something that's going to keep your day, how you're going to be skipping down the street for the entire October and early November, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about Tina Peters. And I want you to think about all these other traitors to the country who've been arrested for the attack on the Capitol on January 6th. And I want you to be thinking about what their mindset would be on election night when Kamala Harris wins the presidency and they realize there's no pardon coming for them. Seriously, I want you to think about that. Think about what they're going to be like, that they know for at least for 4 years they're going to have to sit there and accept responsibility for their actions. I want you to think about it. I don't think they're going to change. I think Tina Peters is going to be just as belligerent and horrible as she always has been the entire time. She really is, and she truly is a horrible human being. I would have put her in for the full 20, but this judge, even though he dressed her down pretty well, only gave her basically half the sentence he could. But I am just going to relish and thrive on the thought of her mentality as she is sitting there in her jail cell and she gets told Kamala Harris is going to be the next president of the United States, and she knows she's in there for a while. Mwah! Chef's kiss. It's the Matt McNeil Show. It's the Matt McNeil Show. Smile on my face, man. Enjoy prison, Tina. Bye, Tina. Oh, you precious little peach. Oh, she is. I don't know how this is going. Maybe this is a lifetime TV series, but when you send I think the term is a Karen to jail. Oh, I imagine it's going to be like I said, November. Think about that, November 5th. They call it for Kamala Harris and know that Tina Peters is going to be sitting in her jail cell realizing, oh my God, I'm in jail for at least 4 years. Delicious. Delicious. You say, I'm not, I can say, I'm a Christian and I am not hoping ill will on somebody. This is me saying, you know what? You need to pay for your crimes. And this has been one of the most unapologetic human beings that's ever existed. She does not feel she's done anything wrong. She has had court after court prove that she is an idiot, that she doesn't know what she's talking about. And, I'll visit her in prison. Visit the prisoners. Gospel of Matthew. I'll go visit her. I'll say, hey, how's it going? Bring you a fruit basket, but I couldn't bring it in because, jail. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. Ex-Representative Liz Cheney will campaign alongside Vice President Kamala Harris on Thursday at an event in Wisconsin schoolhouse known for the birthplace of the Republican Party. Cheney, who endorsed Harris in September, is among a growing cadre of former GOP officials and ex-Trump world staffers who are ditching partisan differences in an effort to prevent a second Trump presidency. In the home stretch of the narrowly divided race, the Harris-Walz campaign is ramping up its effort to attract Republican-leaning and undecided voters. Harris said she'd appoint a Republican to her cabinet if she did win in November. So here are some of the other Republicans who have endorsed her campaign. Vice President Dick Cheney, like I said, that's a strange bedfellow. OnlyFans. Ugh. Dick Cheney. Who once supported the former president, said he would vote for Harris, warning in a statement that he believed Trump would never be trusted with power again. In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump, he said in a statement in September. Former Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger, who showed up, of course, the folks in Chicago know, showed up in Chicago for the DNC. He spoke at the DNC in August where he said the GOP has switched the allegiance from the principles that gave it the purpose to a man who only purposes himself. He told GOP voters, vote for our bedrock values and vote for Kamala Harris. Former Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, who served in Congress for close to 2 decades, said he would support the Democratic ticket earlier this week, citing an experience working with Walz in the House and the Harris in the Senate. I would encourage all Republicans to feel the way and do the same. In a recent appearance on ABC's This Week, Flake said he can't endorse a candidate who tries to use the powers of the presidency to overturn an election without mentioning Trump by name. Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who opposed Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, said at the DNC that Republicans who opted to vote for Harris were patriots. In May, he endorsed President Biden before the president bowed out, labeling Trump a criminal defendant without a moral compass. A lot of ex-Trump White House officials have also endorsed Harris. Former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham have also joined members of the former administration staff choosing not to back him in 2024. Scaramucci, speaking to MSNBC the night of the first debate between Harris and Trump, said, she is the person dedicated to service. He's the person that's dedicated to self-service. Grisham spoke to the DNC. She told the crowd Kamala Harris tells the truth. She respects the American people, and she has my vote. Cassidy Hutchinson, the former Trump aide who delivered key testimony in the House January 6th committee, endorsed Harris on Wednesday, saying she's really, really proud of the vote for the Democratic ticket. Other former Trump administration and Republican officials like former Vice President Mike Pence have refused to endorse Trump, but have stopped short of endorsing the Democratic ticket. The Harris campaign released an ad Thursday titled Unstable Threat, featuring the words of Trump's former allies, including Pence, deeming him unfit to serve. Another person who might actually end up endorsing Harris is Melania Trump. She's revealed her support for abortion rights Thursday ahead of the release of her upcoming memoir, exposing a stark contrast with her husband, Republican presidential nominee, rocks for brains. In a video posted on her Twitter account on Thursday morning, the former First Lady defended women's individual freedoms to do what they want and with their body, a position at odds with much of the Republican Party and her own husband, who has struggled to find a consistent message on abortion while wedged between anti-abortion supporters within his base and the majority of the Americans who support abortion rights. Will Donald Trump send a mob to go kill his wife? I got news for you. He probably could get the mob ready. Individual freedoms is a fundamental principle that I safeguard, she said in the video. Without a doubt, there is no room for compromise when it comes to the essential right and all the women's possess from birth, individual freedom. What does my body, my choice really mean? The video appears to confirm excerpts from her self-titled memoir reported by The Guardian on Wednesday. She has rarely expressed her personal political views and has been largely absent from the campaign trail. But in her memoir, she is set to be released publicly next Tuesday. She argues that the decision to end the pregnancy should be left to the woman and the doctor, free from any intervention or pressure from the government, according to the published excerpts. I will say this, they cannot have her now show up at any event. So she's not going to be, because can you imagine the visual of all of a sudden having her come on out to an event and the crowd boos? And that's what will happen. The crowd would boo their potential first lady. It's interesting. I know there are a lot of writers that hate listening to this show. Hi, thanks for listening. Here's, I don't know what you guys need to hear. I mean, it's all these Republican officials, many military officials, many of our clandestine agency executives, people across the board, many Republicans as well, who haven't maybe necessarily endorsed Harris, but have said there's real problems with Donald Trump. Here you are. You hear all of this. And you say, Trump's still my God. Trump is still my God. He's my God. I love him. He's my God. I'd do anything for him. He's a God. Because that's what you really think. He's not worth anything. He isn't. And he was on Jeffrey Epstein's child sex plane to his child sex island with underage girls multiple times. At what point that doesn't become the deal breaker, that's on you. That's on you. You're voting for what you scream you hate with a smile on your face. Chicago, Seattle, talk to you tomorrow. Minneapolis, St. Paul, hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your Thursday. Good to have you with us. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. I'm excited about my next guest as there's about a million ways we could talk today because there's a lot of things that she is doing, and she is doing quite well. Naomi Kritzer is kind enough to join us. She is a well-known author. She's in science fiction and fantasy, living in St. Paul. Been writing science fiction and fantasy for 20 years. The short story Cat Pictures, Please won the 2016 Hugo and Locus Awards, as one is nominated for a Nebula Award. She's also catfishing on Catnet, came out November 19th, 2012. Basically, she's also been actively publishing. Her latest book is Liberty's Daughter, that came out last year. So a well-recognized, well-noticed, honored writer, which I could talk to Naomi about that for a long time. But she is magnificent because she will tell stories for food. The blog, which goes and in-depth talks about a lot of the lower races that are going to be on your ballot. You know what? I was talking about this earlier. You fill out your ballot, president, senator, blah, 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 and then you flip it over, and then there's a whole bunch of judges. There might be some county seats you don't know about. A lot of people don't know anything about those races, but the reality is you should absolutely know who's running in those races because those races matter, and Naomi is doing a fantastic job of keeping us up to date on that, and she's kind enough to join us to talk about both of these issues. Hello, and thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
My pleasure. Now, so let's start with the blog. What prompted you? I mean, here you are, you're a writer, you've been a successful writer, you've been quite a books published. What all of a sudden triggered you to say, you know what, there is no one really talking about these lesser races, and somebody needs to do the information on this?
So the way I got started doing this was 20 years ago. I was researching my own ballot, and I realized that you could get a sample ballot. I don't remember if at that point it was via the Secretary of State's website or some other place. But I had a copy of my sample ballot, and I was like, okay, I can actually look up some of these people and figure out who I want to vote for. At the time, in addition to the stuff that's currently on the ballot, we had library board on the ballot in Minneapolis, which is where I was living. And we had to vote for soil and water commissioners. They were on the ballot at the time. And so I started Googling and taking notes. And I figured I needed to take notes, so I would just take them in the text entry window of my LiveJournal. And then when I was done, I went ahead and turned that into a LiveJournal post. I had a couple of local friends, and I figured I did all this research, so I can put that on I can put that online, and maybe it'll be useful to some of my friends. And then I think I did that the next year as well. And then the year after that, I didn't. And I had friends email me, and they were like, "Why didn't you write about the park board, whatever it was we were voting on?" I didn't know who to vote for. So it very quickly became something where I had readers who were telling me that they found it useful. And so I kept doing it. And initially I only did my own ballot, but over time I started researching more of the city, which at the time I lived in Minneapolis, and I moved to St. Paul and I expanded to St. Paul. Mm-hmm. I only do races that appear on the ballots in Minneapolis and St. Paul, though, because once there's so much local knowledge that I rely on, and it's already so much work that I don't try to, I once looked at some council races in Richfield, so it's just over the line, and I looked at the websites and I was like, I don't know what these people are talking about. These are talking about important local issues that I am not plugged into because I don't live there. Yeah. But that's how I got started.
Well, and one of the truth, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you're doing because I've tried to do this. We used to have, and this will be a shot on the newspapers. I remember when the newspapers back in the 80s would print out a special edition with all these races in there, and they talk about the judge, and at least you'd have some basic information. I've done online searches, and there's some of these candidates, you can't find a dang thing about them. We had a school board race in Hopkins where it looked like a land developer was running 3 candidates to basically just try to peel off part of the Hopkins School District and put it in the Edina School District. And just trying to find anything about those candidates was brutal. You're doing this race after race after race. That has got to be... there is an amount of time and effort that is in here I can see because I've tried to do this, which is outstanding. And I can't tell you what a treasure it is. And I can't encourage enough people to go to We'll Tell Stories for Food because it is really, you're not going to find this information anywhere else.
Yeah, I started looking for it and sharing it because I wasn't finding it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of where I got started, was like not being able to find anything where this was put together. So, and yeah, it's a lot of work.
Oh, it is. Well, I want to get, if you don't mind, I'm going to read a little bit from one of your posts. This is about, and this is Hennepin County. So there are some races which will show up in like Hennepin County and stuff like that. But it is obviously, it's on this because it's in Minneapolis specifically. This is the 4th District Court 24, Matthew Frank versus Christopher Leckrone. And Judge Matthew Frank was appointed by Governor Walz in 2023. There are basically 2 really straightforward reasons to vote for Judge Frank and not his opponent. One of the foundational experience lawyers should have if they want to become a judge is to spend time in court. You can become a prosecutor, defense attorney, or a litigator, but you really need to be going to court. According to his resume, Christopher Leckrone has worked for many years primarily in compliance, a job done entirely outside of courtrooms. He does list pro bono work with foster kids that might involve going into the courtroom, but that's very clearly not what he's spending most of his time doing. Matthew Frank was one of the lead prosecutors in the state's case against Derek Chauvin. And the 19 judges in Hennepin County up for election this year, the guys Leckrone decided to run against. Leckrone has completely hidden or sanitized social media presence, and I found no indication of his political views except that he opted to run against this particular judge. I can't tell you. I mean, I now know, okay, Matthew Frank, he's getting my vote. It's stuff like that. There are just, sometimes you flip that ballot over, there's 20 of them, and you're, okay, fine. But you don't know anything about them, but you should, because these races do matter, and it does matter who's going to be holding that job as a judge.
Judgeships are really hard. They're really hard to research partly because a certain amount of what happens in a courtroom is genuinely supposed to be private, and some of it, I would, a lot of what judges do is it's genuinely a job. It's not a political job. It's just a job. They're there to make sure that lawsuits happen fairly, that criminal cases are heard fairly. They're genuinely they're genuinely not doing a Republican job or a Democratic job if they're doing it right a lot of the time. I feel like on the Supreme Court, it really matters that that we have a Supreme Court in Minnesota, the state Supreme Court. Everyone was appointed by a Democrat at this point, and I think that matters a lot. I'm obviously, as a Democrat, I am highly in favor of that. But in an actual courtroom, in a county courtroom in Hennepin County or Ramsey County, these are people that are they're hearing cases where there are, a lot of the time there are not particularly political questions. And people bring in their own beliefs about the world and their own values, and that matters. But I was on a jury one time, and it was a really mundane criminal case. There was a guy who was sharing a household with a couple. It was officially a domestic violence case, but the people he'd assaulted were not romantic partners. They were roommates. Got mad because he thought somebody had drunk all his alcohol, and like there was, he hit his roommates. And like the judge, I have no idea what his political views were, because it really, in the context of the case that we were hearing, it just wasn't relevant. What mattered was that he was a good listener, that he was respectful of everyone in the room, and from the jurors to the defendant, that he was compassionate, that he was like, but that also he was like respectful of everyone's time. So like, if the defendant took the stand, wanted to like kind of ramble, and he kept telling the defense lawyer, you need to like rein in your client, like you are wasting the juror's time by letting him ramble. It was thought-provoking and educational, and gave me a really like specific view of what I thought I wanted in a judge. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to know like what you're going to get looking at the judges, but like I do at the judge candidates. But I do feel like, if you're coming to run for judge and you don't have certain experiences, you're probably not qualified. You're probably not as qualified as the person you're running against. So.
Well, and by the way, a great point, and the judges matter, and I think that we are getting into this area now where it used to be about, okay, how will they treat a defendant or a prosecutor, and now it's what's their political belief. And I think we need to know these things before we just elect people in. And school board is another case of this. You cover the school board races. It used to be a school board races. Well, I'm not for putting new air conditioning units on this elementary school. That was the cutting edge decisions you had to make. Nowadays, it's I want to ban every book in the library, and you're like, okay, it's as you look at some of these races, it's just since you've been doing it, has it caught your mind how much some of these candidates are so inexperienced and actually have no background whatsoever as they try to run for an office that they don't seem to be qualified for in any capacity?
That's always been true. There have always been flake candidates who ran for office who like had no real idea what the job was going to involve. I am really aware of it because I research all the candidates, but like it's not new. I mean, one of the first races in Minnesota that I was paying attention to was in 1994. I was a college student, and Sharon Anderson was the Republican candidate for state attorney general. She is not qualified for that position. I feel really confident in saying this. She's still running for offices, including sometimes AG. She's never won a primary since, but she's, yeah. So like, and that was 1994. It was a few years ago now. So yeah, no. I mean, there are totally people that run for offices where they don't have a qualification beyond, well, the law says you have to be 30, and I am 32, and I am a U.S. citizen. Therefore, I am qualified for that.
I should be in charge of the nuclear codes. Yes.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Like, yes, you're a natural born citizen and more than 35 years old. So yes, according to the U.S. Constitution, you are qualified to be U.S. president, but I really think we could do better.
Naomi Kritzer is joining us. The blog is, once again, We'll Tell Stories for Food. So go ahead.
Can we tell people the URL? Because it's my name. It's naomikritzer.com. I think they'll find it more easily there than if they Google the title of the blog.
Here's what I'll promise everyone. After this, on all the socials, on the Blue Sky, on the Facebook, on the Mastodon, on the Threads, and even on godforsaken Elon's world, I'll basically make sure it's all posted out there and put all the links out there as well. One last question about this before we get into your writing. Is there a race this year that you're like, oh my God, the research you've done in this that has really put you back on your heels?
So I'm currently working on my post about the U.S. Senate race. Okay. So like the people running against Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah.
There are 4 people on the ballot, and like, I think part of why this race is as goofy as it is that, like, I don't think anybody thinks Amy Klobuchar is particularly vulnerable as a candidate. Like, she's won with 60% or more of the votes every time she's run. So, so the Republican candidate is this guy named Royce White.
Oh, yeah.
Who is, he's a real piece of work. Who, among other things, like, my favorite sort of little detail about him is that when he ran for Congress in 2022 against Ilhan Omar, in the primary against Ilhan, I don't think he actually won the primary, but when he ran in 2022, he spent $1,800 of his campaign money in a strip club.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Like,
appetizers. Those appetizers aren't cheap, man. But that's that's why everyone goes to a strip club is appetizers.
Definitely, definitely. They really needed, So he was endorsed by the Republicans, and then won the primary.
Yes.
Like, they had a normal guy, like a normie Republican who was running, and like Royce White won. So that's the Republican candidate. And then there are two other people running, both women. I was just researching one of them. She's Joyce Lacey. She's running as a Independence Alliance candidate, which means she's a Jesse-crat. Jesse Ventura's party, what's left of it. And she, her big issue is guardianship abuse, which is actually like a legitimate thing to be concerned about. Although I don't think running for U.S. Senate is at all going to get her, going to make, help to move the needle, right? Mm-hmm. She's really mad that Amy Klobuchar didn't pass the laws that she once passed on a state level, which, I mean, again, like, some people really don't understand the job they're running for and like who would do the thing they want to have done, right? That's kind of the issue. And then the fourth person on the ballot is a woman named Rebecca Whiting, who's a libertarian. And it's just been one of those races where, like, there's just a lot of rabbit holes to go down. Well, and
no one is talking about these other candidates that are there, but you are, and you're doing the due diligence. Yeah. We've actually got a running tabulation. Last time when she ran against Neuberger, I think they called that race at 32 seconds into as soon as the polls closed. We've got a running tabulation. I think 7 is the over-under now. They're going to just, as soon as the polls close at 8, it's 8 o'clock and 7 seconds. Amy Klobuchar wins Minnesota. We're pretty confident that there's an over-under we can live with on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The blog is We'll Tell Stories for Food, but let's get to the author, Naomi Kritzer, and talk about your books. Liberty's Daughter out here. You've been writing science fiction here. I do love talking to authors because I think writers are amazing. And the fact that you guys come up with new ideas and new thought processes and the way you have to think things through is just amazing. So I want to talk, first of all, what is your approach when you sit down and you've come up with an idea for a book? How is it that you approach trying to flush out the world that you're about to write about?
People sometimes divide authors into sort of two types. They call them plotters and pantsers. Mm-hmm. Pantsers, it's in the sense of writing by the seat of their pants. I tend to be a plotter. I like outlines. I'm not a strict outliner, but like I tend to think about sort of the arc of the story I want. And the very first time I ever wrote a book, I had a sense of the overall arc, and then the actual planning I did was almost in the style of a road trip where you know where you're spending each night. Mm-hmm. So like I knew what the big emotional turning point moments of the book were. And those were sort of the, one was 20% in, one was 40% in, 60% in, and 80% in, like more or less. Like I had a sense of where those sort of, big stopping points were. And then each section, I sort of outlined it, figured out what I was going to do in that section. And then I wrote like from point A to point B. So it was like, I drove from Minneapolis to Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And then like the next day obviously I did this over many months. And so like the next day you might drive from Kansas City to whatever city is like 8 hours down the road from there. I don't know. I don't actually go on a lot of road trips, but like that was sort of the approach I took to figuring out how I was gonna have a novel's worth of stuff happening, and that it would be paced. It worked pretty well for helping me pace it, because I'd written short stories at that point, but it was my first novel, and I was figuring out how you do novel pacing. The thing was that each section like ended with like characters in a particular spot, and when I was done, I realized that like I'd gotten a lot better at writing as I went through the novel. So I took that first section, tossed the whole thing, and rewrote it from scratch, knowing that if I got the characters at the end to the right positions, I could like, put the new version of the first section on, and it would all work.
And I want to just for everyone out there that's listening, that's thinking about writing a book, you sometimes have to do that. You sometimes have to start from scratch. And I think that that's part of the problem I have with some writers, is that they get so intimidated by that idea to start from scratch, to redo this again. But whether it's a minimalist or people that are, Clancy-esque, where they're writing in, extreme detail. I think that the best writers, and especially with science fiction, is people that, regardless of how much you flesh it out, you have a complete world that's represented. And I was looking at the Liberty's Daughter. This was once again your book that came out last year, and just reading this, an archipelago of constructed platforms and old cruise ships assembled by a libertarian separatist a generation ago. And I just sort of like, okay, now we're cooking with gas. All right. You've created something just in that realm that can feed so many different things of the story. But at the same time, I mean, I'm always amazed by writers that can come up with that, and then as you live in the current world, be able to explore this world that you're creating.
Yeah, I mean, I was inspired to write Liberty's Daughter after I found out that there were people actually trying to build seasteads.
Really?
And I started thinking, like, part of what was fun about that as a setting is that like you could do like something that was like a Mars colony, but you didn't have to set it far enough in the future that a Mars colony was plausible, because it could be just kind of hanging out in the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, my sister went to college with the guy who runs the Seasteading Institute. So that's how I heard about seasteading as a concept.
Oh,
ideas are everywhere.
Libertarian. We've heard there was some guy that wanted to do Libertarian Island one time and said it will be a hoot when they say who's making coffee. And I just said at that point it will be. I'll let that be a surprise. It's like, wait a second, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. And scene. And
yeah, that's a big part of that's a big element of the book, is actually thinking about the fact that like a lot of the people who find libertarianism appealing are like people like Peter Thiel, right? Like really, really wealthy people who do not make their own coffee. And like I started thinking about like what would happen, like how they would get the underclass of people that would be willing to make the coffee and clean the toilets and mop the floors and care for the children and all this other stuff. Like there's like a real set of real limitations for like getting people to come do this stuff for you if you're running something like a seastead. So that's a big, like a huge amount of the book is sort of talking about the people. The main character, the protagonist, is the daughter of one of the really privileged guys that's sort of running everything. But she's a teenager. She starts like looking around and asking questions in the way that teenagers will. And a lot of the story is about her sort of slowly identifying less with her wealthy father and more with the underclass of the seastead, and what that means and how that ends up playing out. Because the solutions that the very privileged will come up to come up with to avoid having to make their own coffee can be really pretty grim.
And once again, Naomi Kritzer is joining us. There is if a person wants to read a book a little bit about your writing here, you have put out there The Year Without Sunshine. It's published online, free to read. It's basically about mutual aid set in Minneapolis. Talk a little bit about what's that story about. So if people want to find out a little bit more about you, what can they expect with that little story you put out?
Okay, so The Year Without Sunshine was published on Clark's World. It won a Hugo Award this year, and won a Nebula Award.
Congratulations!
The story did. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And that story is about. It's set in Minneapolis. It's set after a disaster that is not specified, and it is about a block of people in South Minneapolis that come together to survive, to support each other, and to keep alive a woman on their block who has a chronic condition that means she needs oxygen. And so she has a oxygen compressor that only runs when there's power, and there's these constant rolling power outages. Like there's power some of the time, but not all of the time. So it's about these people on this block in Minneapolis coming together to provide mutual aid. And this story spoke to a lot of people this year. Like a lot of people really liked this story. You don't have to be from Minneapolis to like it, but Minneapolis people who read it generally felt there are multiple people who think it's their block. So
yeah. The Year Without Sunshine. I'll get this link, and I'll put the link out for everyone out there. And congratulations on the accolades. And that's one of the things I like to do is, it's great, and I love we'll tell stories for food and what you're doing there. You deserve every bit of credit. You're writing award-winning literature. That is magnificent, and especially as we have a modern war against writing at times, whether just someone doesn't like something they want to take down. I'm becoming more and more respectful of not only teachers and librarians, but the writers themselves who, in the face of this culture, don't shy away from writing things. And so you and I could talk for 2 or 3 hours. All right? You and I could easily talk. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time today. If you are up for it, I'd love to have you back to talk about both issues again, your writing and the blog, if you have some time.
Happy to. Just let me know.
I will definitely talk. We'll have you on for the blog before the election for sure, and we'll get some updates on things. Naomi Kritzer, once again, will tell stories for food. I will put out the link for that as well as also link to your books that are available out there and the link to the short story. Naomi, as always, I can't tell you how grateful I am you took the time. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My pleasure. We'll take a break. Come on back. We're way late. Oh, gosh. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Thursday.
In constant sorrow through his...
I am on cloud freaking 9, man. Naomi Kritzer. Wow. That's... It helps that she has two wildly successful things that she can talk about that I love talking about. I love talking to writers, talking about books and the process and the writing. I love talking about politics. But gosh, man, she's fantastic. I will post the links to everything out there. We'll post the interview as well a little bit later on because, that is, wow. An absolute pleasure. And that was a long interview, too. She was fantastic. Patrick, Mickey's Diner in St. Paul. How often have you ever gone over there and had a meal over there?
It's one of my favorites.
Good news for you. It's back.
I saw that, too.
Mickey's Diner car served meals downtown St. Paul on Thursday for the first time since the pandemic forced them to closure. Mickey's, a St. Paul landmark, has been featured in films and attracted diners from all walks of life at all hours of the day since it first opened in 1939. With its soft opening, the restaurant will be open from 6 a.m. till it runs out of food daily. So I'd get there early. Mickey's cannot die. They said it's very tough, especially when with the location here, because everyone in downtown just stopped working, he added, but now we're back on track. Someone told me that one of the things the claims are saying, the guy that used to work there could, in each hand, crack 3 eggs at once. Think about that. And so he could crack, because he could do it in both hands, 6 eggs at a time. I barely can do one egg at once, and they're doing 6 at a time? Dear Lord. The Mickey's is open. Convention and Grill is open again. The world is healing, folks. The world is healing. Oh. And by the way, speaking of this, if I can't say, we bring up the pandemic. Can I tell you how many Republicans have posted in the last 2 months about, oh, you got that there and your gas prices. Here's some guy. I just took this guy up on Threads. And by the way, if you're not on Threads, you need to be on Threads. Follow me on Threads. I'll follow you on Threads. OnlyFans. All right. Okay. So this is a Hollywood Heffern. I've been keeping track of the gas for my fill-ups for over 20 years, so I'll check back to 2020, and this is what gas prices were where I live per gallon. In June of 2020, it was $1.77 a gallon. In August, it was $1.61. It was down to $1.53 in November, $1.49 in December, and then Joe Biden came into office in $2.49. Remember those prices when you fill up, go to the voting booth in 35 days? Of course, my response, it's hilarious that your good old days were when we were all scared in our homes, afraid of getting sick, and thousands of people were dying every day because of COVID, or as you call them, the good old days. You want to leave that little nugget out of your thing. We were all scared to death about going out in public. Someone would cough or sniffle, and we'd all stop and stare. Trying to find toilet paper, trying to find face masks, hoping that there would be some sort of vaccination. The world had to shut down. The reason why gas was so cheap there is because no one was going anywhere. Heck, when we started this, when they shut down this state, I actually had a pass to come here to the radio station because they weren't wanting people on the roads. Gas was cheap because nobody was driving and they had a massive surplus. So stop doing that. You guys just, if I get it, you don't care that millions of people died of COVID. I get it. You're heartless jackasses who are, gas was cheap when I didn't drive at all because everything was closed. And might I also make the point, because you knuckleheads were the ones screaming about, I want my chicken wings at a sports bar. I don't want to eat any more chunky soup at home. You're the reason why gas prices went back up, because you demanded things were open again so you could go drive around. So, yeah. You guys are broken people. You guys are broken people. Which brings me to something I need to bring up again from earlier this week, because I've had a few people really come at me and insist that I somehow am wrong about the notion that since Republicans have taken over rural America, that rural America has basically gone right into the crapper. It has. It has. Now, don't get me wrong. Technology has done a business on agriculture just because we've created the machines that it wasn't that long ago that a farmer, it was 100, 120 years ago, you were clearing the land with some oxen and a blade, that you would have to go and manually tear down stumps and rocks that were in the field. We've now gotten to a point where as technology increased, and all of a sudden the tractors got better, and the combines got better, and the manufacturing got better. That did a number on you, just technology. All of a sudden, one guy could farm the same amount of fields as 10 guys. That was part of the problem. And that's one of the reasons why, we can talk about the great exodus of people that moved out of agricultural communities. Agricultural communities used to be the bread and butter, the main population centers. And then it just changed. They went to the cities because there weren't any jobs anymore out there. That the farms were getting gobbled up. 1980s was horrible. And Reagan sat back as agricultural America got wiped out. But even so, there were still, when you go back to the 1980s, most of those towns, I have lived in rural America. My family came from northern Minnesota and the Iron Range. I look at pictures of Virginia, Minnesota from like the 1950s and 60s, and I see a thriving community with department stores, furniture stores, movie theaters. You had every type of business you wanted there locally in town. You could go, there's multiple grocery stores. It was a quality of life everyone could appreciate in regards to the fact that you had the sustainability. Today, that world doesn't exist. And I'm not saying that the world was necessarily better. I'm just saying that's what the world was. I mean, there still is a tremendous amount of racism. Let's just be honest about it. But you had at least communities that could function. We could talk about big box stores. I have no problem in bringing up big box stores. And you open up a Target or a Walmart or a superstore in one community, and it bankrupts every store within 40 miles of that one store because and that's by design. They create it to where there's no competition, then they jack their prices up and they make some money. I've seen that with my own eyes when they opened up the Walmart in Iowa Falls. And I was living in Eldora, Iowa at that time. And I watched them drive every business out of business they could. Every single one. Outdoor stores, gardening stores, pharmacies, gone. Just annihilated. Yep. And all this happened. And the politicians that they had elected, started electing in the late 1970s and the early 80s. They've been electing them pretty much ever since. They sat there on the sidelines and they did nothing. They watched as all of a sudden the small stores in their town closed. And those Republicans that's a shame. That's a shame. But did they do anything to encourage someone to come open a furniture store or a clothing store in the town? No, of course not. Of course they didn't. Did they go out there and encourage? No, because you know why? As they sit there and go, it's a shame, it's a shame, it's a shame. In the back of their mind, they're saying, I'm getting corporate donations from that big box store, so bye-bye pharmacy. This is what they want. They couldn't compete. This is the fair market. So as they sat there, those same Republicans sat there and said, gee willikers, it's a shame, it's a shame. They weren't going to do anything because the big businesses were paying them to allow them to do this. Healthcare. Used to have health care everywhere out in rural America. Everywhere had a hospital. Everywhere you could pretty much go out and find OBGYN care, cancer care. You might not have the most up-to-date systems. You might have to go to Duluth or you might have to go to a major city hub that was nearby, but you could still, without having to go 6, 7, 8 hours in a car to find unique specialized equipment. Nope. You used to have that relatively common, what they had. And granted, we can make an argument that modern healthcare, much like modern agriculture, has increased in new machines and things. They're expensive, so they can only put them in certain hubs. But the reality is we had earlier this week, and this is what prompted my entire discussion about this. Earlier this week, we had the Mayo Clinic in Fairmont shutting down certain services within that hospital. And where are the Republicans? This is the heart and soul. This community is in my blood. That's what they say, right? Has any of them come on out there and said, well, we need immediate help down here. We need to get the governor. We need people to give us some incentives to get people to come out here. Now, mind you, I can also make the point that when it comes to teachers and it comes to the medical profession, the last 5 years, Republican areas of this country have really been kind of horrible to them. They have. I know multiple teachers who have left rural America because they said, I could not stand having people scream at me about things I just was not doing. I couldn't stand being vilified everywhere I go. Doctors, same way. You want to give me that COVID shot? You're trying to get that brain chip in my head. Oh, trust me, there's plenty of room up in that freaking noggin for a lot of things to bounce around. But you push doctors away. All of a sudden, they can't get staffing, because that was what they quoted, and the Mayo Clinic quoted why they had to pull these out, because they can't get staffing out there. And all of a sudden, now it directly affects you. It's like, wait a minute, why did the doctor who I called Satan on earth leave? Doesn't he know we're good at salt of the earth people, that commie bastard? They don't even hear themselves. But the Republicans that represent you, they're not scrambling back to St. Paul to get you some more health care. Pick an issue. Water quality. Water quality. Republicans have sat back while your waters have been toxified and poisoned, and now you have to go buy water. In Minnesota, the land of frickin' 10,000 lakes, you have to go buy water because the big corporate agribusinesses have poisoned your aquifers. Or the water just doesn't even exist because that's all going to the farms. You humans need to drink something else. Broadband, businesses, jobs, my God. Jobs have been fleeing these communities, and they have done nothing because they're not going to go against the corporate agriculture and the corporate entities that want them to be the only thing on the block. So no, I stand by this. Rural America has been destroyed by the Republicans, who are still being elected out there, and are still, after 50 years of failing to do a goddamn thing to help those people, you're going to go elect them again. Not because they deserve it, but because they brainwash you into thinking that they're actually doing something when they're taking every damn dime out of your back pocket and telling you to say thank you for doing so. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Thursday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. Greg is in Minnetonka. Let's get Greg's call in here really quick. Welcome on in, Greg.
How you doing?
All right, man.
Hey, you were commenting about a couple things about Reagan and in the 80s and the farm economy. I was farming at that time, and Jimmy Carter put the grain embargo in place, and it just absolutely killed the farm economy. I mean, and at that time, even if you had really good credit, I was paying 21, 22% for operating loans. My dad was getting 17, 18% on CDs.
Okay.
And so...
Okay, well, so you have the grain embargo that happens, and this was back in the 1970s, and this is what led you guys to start electing Republicans. And so things are so much better. Things, Greg.
It was like 1981, too, that he put the grain embargo in place.
So that's, like I said, 50 years ago. That's when they started you started electing Republicans, and things are so much better in the agricultural community than today than they are back then.
Say that again, please.
So you're saying today, since Republicans have been there with all the schools that have had to close, with all the medical facilities that have to close, the lack of jobs. I mean, most communities, your jobs are basically, if they have a co-op or a gas station. You're saying today, 50 years after the Republicans got elected, that things are so much better in rural America than they were back then?
Oh, my gosh, no.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh, no.
Okay.
They're horrible. The town I was living in at the time, they had, Main Street at one time had 6 clothing stores.
Yeah.
Now they have 0. They had 6. They had 3 drugstores. Now there's 1. They had 2 lumber yards. Now there's 1. They can go to Sioux Falls and buy all they need 30 miles away. And part of that, it's a good news, bad news deal. But the Republicans, Dwight Eisenhower, put the interstate system in, which was a good thing. But it just killed Main Street. No matter.
Well,
why would you go 9 miles?
Well, and Greg, I appreciate the phone call, and I think we're getting it. I would say the big box stores did a number on Main Street. But once again, as this is all happening, Republicans are going into a town when they see that pharmacy closed and that clothing store closed and all this stuff, and they're coming back and they're just hanging their head, but they're not doing anything to try to solve these problems. And as a matter of fact, if I can, I was going to talk about a different story, but I will just, one thing I have talked about before is people I have known where they have seen firsthand, and I saw this firsthand too, a company wants to come on in and they want to make a product in a community. And so they're going to come on in there and they're going to get a lease on this property and they're going to go in that industrial area they have outside of town. They're going to get there. And then all of a sudden they find out, oh, they're going to offer, $20 an hour and they're going to give benefits. Well, wait a second here. No one else in town is offering that. We can't have that. And so all of a sudden they pull that guy in and say, we are glad you guys are going to move here, but the rest of us are paying $13 an hour and we don't give benefits. And so if you do this, you're going to take all my best workers. So if you try to bring that into town, well, guess what? We're going to run you out of town. Well, the guy basically ended up leaving. And then they sit there and say, why doesn't anybody want to come in here with business? Well, because corporate ag and corporate America have built a world, a very controllable world in rural America. They can't do this in the metro areas nearly as effectively. But in rural communities where there isn't a lot of other competition, they've created a world where they pay the least amount, give no benefits, give no real hope of change, and basically keep anyone out that's going to possibly help them. We talked about broadband earlier this week. For decades, the Republicans were talking about, we need to get broadband out in America. And that's a great idea. 100%. Just on the medical side, the educational side, the manufacturing side, there's a lot of reasons why that should be. But yet time and time again, as they were the ones screaming the most about broadband, when they would bring their bills to the floor, there wouldn't be any broadband in there. And the Democrats are like, well, we're willing to do the broadband. And they're like, no, you're wasting money. And they built broadband for their cabin area or for their buddy's business in one local area, but they weren't doing state to state. The Democrats fixed that. The Republicans are not working for you in these communities. That is the problem. And it's a complicated world, and there's lots of strings being pulled. But the reality is one string that's not being pulled is the Republicans going up to St. Paul and saying, we got to do something to help these people. They're just not doing it. And the reason why is they're betrothed to the corporate entities that fund their campaigns and give them the lobbying gigs. Native Roots Radio is up next. We are back on a Friday. Have a good one. Till tomorrow. See ya.